Chapter 6. How to write the materials and methods section. As what we have discussed previously, science developed very quickly in the 19th century, and there were great demands for the publication of research results in journals. But the journal space was very limited, so the concise and clear writing format was needed. In this situation, the invention of the method was made. In the introduction, the first section of the main body of the paper, you should present the methodology employed in the study. If necessary, you should also justify the reasons for your choice of a certain method instead of other competing methods. Now, let's turn to the section Materials and Methods. In some journals, it is also named Experimental Procedures. In this section, the complete and thorough details about research method must be offered. Usually, most of this section should be written in the past tense. What's the purpose of this section? The main purpose of the materials and methods section is to describe and defend the design of the experiment with enough details so that a competent researcher can repeat the experiments. Of course, there are other purposes like providing information to help readers judge whether the experimental methods are reasonable or appropriate, so as to justify the validity of the findings. In the end, readers could assess whether the results could be generalized. This section plays a very important role because it lays a solid foundation for the research results. To be specific, readers expect to reproduce your results, which must be based on the fact that your experiments and methods could be definitely repeated. If the readers fail to reproduce the same, at least the similar results, your paper cannot reflect good science. According to my experience, when your paper is subjected to peer review, an experienced reviewer usually reads the materials and methods section so carefully. If they find there exist some unreasonable points in your methods and experiments, or your experiments cannot be repeated as you describe, there is great possibility that your paper will be thrown into the reject box, even though your results are really fantastic or extraordinary. Now, let's focus on materials. What exactly are regarded as materials? They include accurate technical introductions, experiment subjects, quantities, chemical and physical properties of the reagents used, and preparation source or method. But you have to pay more attention to some key points, which would be likely to be ignored. It's better to avoid trade names of reagents because there is a risk for inserting advertisements of reagents. Then you could use generic or chemical names of reagents, but there is an exception which needs your concern. In your materials used, you have to realize that some proprietary names may be known only in the country of origin, and there are obvious differences among proprietary products. Suppose these differences could be important, then it is essential to include trade names and, at the same time, the names of the manufacturers. One thing has to be mentioned. When trade names are usually registered trademarks, they must be capitalized to distinguish themselves from generic names. The generic description is based on the trademarks. Sometimes, if some journals have the special requirements, you have to offer the generic description plus trademark symbols. Next, another important element of materials is experimental subject, like human beings, animals, plants, and microorganisms. The last three should be identified individually and accurately, usually by genus, species, and strain designations, without the exception of sources and special characteristics description, including age, sex, and generic and physiological status. But for human subjects, the criteria for selection should be described, and an informed consent statement should also be included. In fact, the approval of use of both human and animal subjects by the corresponding committee should be mentioned. I have emphasized the importance of the reproducibility of results. So, you need to take care to describe research materials. In fact, the detailed specifications about what I mentioned above are usually presented in the journal. So, you need to carefully read the instructions to authors of the journal to which you plan to submit the paper. That is to say, most of the time, a carefully worded statement is needed. In the field of biology, for example, there is a journal named In Vitro Cellular and Developmental Biology, Animal. The author is required to clearly indicate the source of cells utilized, species, sex, strain, race, age of donor. What's more, the names, city, and state or country of the source of reagent should be stated within parentheses when first cited. Specific tests used for verification of cell lines and novel reagent should also be identified. Even the specific test for the presence of mycoplasmal contamination of cell lines need to be written out. If these tests, expected or designed, are not implemented, it should be clearly noted. If there is availability of unique biological, biochemical, and/or immunological markers, related data should also be included. Publication of results must be verifiable. Generally, authors should follow the instructions by the journal.